It was only a matter of time before Jake Paul spoke about the wrong man. After embarrassingly calling out anyone who will listen to his nonsense over the last few years, he's now commented on UFC heavyweight Francis Ngannou, calling him an easy matchup, and the scariest man on the planet has since confronted Paul. Today, we're discussing Paul's words, as well as Francis confronting the YouTuber following his ridiculous comments. Stay with us. Let's get straight into it then. What's going on? Jake Paul has yet again embarrassed himself in the world of combat sports. The YouTube star has been everywhere over the past year or two, calling out huge names such as Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, and even Canelo Alvarez. But now, he has seriously overstepped the mark. Speaking recently, Paul was asked to name somebody who he thinks he could take in a fight. So, who does he name? That's right, the heavyweight champion of the world. He replied, I've been having my eye on Francis Ngannou. I think that will be a pretty easy matchup. Of course, the grating YouTuber who flatlined Tyron Woodley last year was almost certainly joking with his response, but there's simply some things you don't joke around about. Once Francis got wind of what he said, he hilariously confronted Paul, who said to the huge Cameroonian, "Hey buddy, we were just talking about, he asked me who do I love?" Francis then replied, he said, "Who would you fight?" Before Paul backtracked and said, "No, he was saying, who do I love?" Ngannou then rehashed his comments, asking Paul, "So you don't want to fight me?" To which Paul, of course, replied to the contrary. Obviously, there's no way Jake Paul's going to fight Francis Ngannou, but this little exchange should also come as a warning to who he talks about, as it could have easily gone wrong had Francis taken it the wrong way. Give us your thoughts below. Francis has again gone in on the UFC now. Stay with us. We're all well aware of the dispute between Francis and the UFC, with Francis regularly calling the organization out for not passing a slice of their gigantic profits on to their fighters. And speaking last week, the big man again claimed that he feels unprotected, which in a sport such as MMA probably isn't a great feeling. Ngannou explained that each and every fighter is in the exact same situation he's in, possibly except for Conor McGregor, before calling on the UFC to reconsider their position on things like fighter pay, sponsorships, a big bugbear of Francis's over the past couple of years, and being allowed to have a personal sponsor on their own shirt. Why not, right? The UFC are making a ton of money through sponsorships, so why shouldn't the fighters? Ngannou said he understands that they want brand recognition by having their fighters wear the same thing, but he also doubled down on the fact that the fighters should see some of their benefit, saying, "We should have some sort of way to check and approve certain sponsors, so you can bring a sponsor inside the UFC and make money out of it." The African champ then suggested that fighters are losing a lot of the power they once had, while the UFC is going the other way, exponentially. Ngannou wants to make MMA the greatest sport, but believes it all starts with paying the fighters what they're worth. Where do you stand on this? Next up, Ciryl Gane has given his thoughts on Francis's dispute with the UFC. As anyone who follows the sport will know, Francis has been locked into a bitter stalemate with the UFC for the past year or two, seeking improved terms on any future contract. But Ciryl Gane has recently claimed that Ngannou's stance simply hasn't paid off. The American gangster has recently claimed that Ngannou's age, injury status, and what's going on in the heavyweight division have all conspired against him, saying Francis Ngannou has made a statement. Francis has said there's no new contract that's been sent over and he's in no hurry, before going on to say Francis has one skill. He's a really big man and he can hit people and knock them down. There's nothing else to put on a resume. He's 35 years old, coming off an injury in the most coveted division in combat history that no one is watching. A pretty brutal assessment. But Gane wasn't finished there. He went on to claim that although it's sometimes good to test those things, his contract and relationship with the UFC, sometimes you just have to admit defeat. Ciryl clearly believes that the organization is moving along with or without Ngannou, which he admits is probably difficult for Ngannou to come to terms with. The former middleweight and light heavyweight challenger finished by claiming that no one is beating down the UFC's door, screaming for Francis Ngannou's return. Wow. Do you guys agree with him? There's more trouble brewing for Jake Paul now. Stay tuned. As if being confronted by Francis Ngannou wasn't bad enough, news broke this week that Jake Paul is now being sued for $100 million by Matchroom Boxing's Eddie Hearn. It was only a matter of time before Paul's mouth got him into a truly terrible spot, and it seems that day has now arrived. The YouTuber recently appeared on IFL TV, claiming that boxing judge Glenn Feldman had taken backhanders from Hearn's operation, but the British promoter wasn't going to take those claims lying down, and has since decided to sue Paul, clearly incensed by Feldman's Feldman ruling against his own fighter, Amanda Serrano, in her fight earlier this year against Ireland's Katie Taylor, Paul claimed, "Clearly, this guy is getting paid money by Matchroom Boxing." He was also enraged by Feldman scoring the recent heavyweight bout between Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua in favor of the latter, which he might actually have a point about. However, after listening to Paul's nonsense for way too long, the world will almost certainly be delighted that something has finally been done about the former Disney kid. Hearn's lawyer Frank Salzano has claimed that Paul has purposely crossed that line, so it will be intriguing to see what happens next in this case. What do you guys make of this? Pretty crazy, right? We're talking Nathan Diaz next. Stick around. Diaz recently fought out the final fight in his UFC contract, scoring an impressive submission win over fellow legend Tony Ferguson. And it's believed that the Stockton favorite will now cross over into the boxing ring, with some suggesting he's destined to fight one of the Paul brothers. As odds for who Diaz will fight next were released earlier this week, both Paul brothers were at the top of the list, with Jake the plus 150 favorite and big brother Logan a little further off as the second favorite at plus 400. Paul has continually called Diaz out over the past couple of years, and with Nate now free of the UFC clutches, there's no reason why the pair couldn't go to war after Jake takes on Anderson Silva at the end of next month. Of course, a catastrophic loss for Paul could put a spanner in the works for any potential future fight with Diaz, but the former UFC welterweight would have no shortage of takers when he's ready to throw down. It's also been rumored that he could be set for a stint in the WWE after being pictured with Stephanie McMahon and Triple H recently, and there's also the prospect of him fighting Conor McGregor for a third time. Could we possibly see that one in the boxing ring? Quite hilariously, bookmakers have also offered plus 2,000 on Diaz fighting Mike Tyson next. Who do you guys think Diaz should face? And finally, Floyd Mayweather has recently given his thoughts on Jake Paul. As we know, Floyd Mayweather is no stranger to these celebrity crossover fights, having spent his last few years on the exhibition boxing circuit, and he's now revealed that as long as Jake keeps boxing old MMA fighters, he'll continue not to take him seriously. Of course, Paul has boxed both Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley over his last 3 fights, Woodley twice, easily beating Askren and scoring a points win followed up by a huge knockout win over Woodley. However, both of these guys were much more renowned for their wrestling during their careers, although Woodley did score a big knockout win over Robbie Lawler to win the welterweight title back in the day, but Floyd doesn't care about any of that. Speaking about Paul as a boxer recently, the boxing GOAT said, "Jake Paul, as of right now, for what he's doing, it's good for what he's doing, but once he fights a actual real fighter, it's gonna be bad. But one thing I like about him, he's selling it, and he's making good money. He's entertaining. I like it." He then said that he'll continue to look good and shine as long as he's fighting these guys, but what do you guys think? Let us know below. As usual, thanks for dropping by today, and remember to tune in again next time for some more fun and games. And why not do us a solid by liking and sharing today's video while also subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on any more great content. Bye guys.